Hello everyone, welcome back to Dark Tower YouTube. This week we are going to spend some quality time with Detta Walker in the sandbox. We're going to watch Detta and Odetta swap character traits, and we're going to watch Eddie not be on his guard again and again and again. So glad to be back with you here. My name is Michelle McEwen. I am your host. And here at Dark Tower YouTube, we're taking a deep psychological dive into Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower, examining the magic, the metaphysics, and the mystery of it all. This is a big episode. It's going to be 2 parts. And in case you're confused, I am re-recording this because I didn't like the audio on the first one that I did, and it's been bugging me. And so I thought, just redo it, Michelle. So this is going to be the same information. If you already watched part 1 of section 4 of Drawing of the Three, this is the same thing. I'm almost done the next part, by the way, but just so you know what's going on here. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to be talking about the Drawing of the Three, Detta on the Other Side, and Reshuffle. This is going to be part 1, getting as far as we get, okay? I want to talk about Odetta's names because there's a lot here, starting with the idea, the fact that Odetta Holmes is a real person, was a real person. And I didn't know that until I did a deeper dive into this material. She was a famous singer, and not just any famous singer. Odetta Holmes was known as the voice of the civil rights movement. So we're cooking with gas now, guys. And a lot of famous people said a lot of amazing things about her. I'm not going to read every single one of them. You can go look it up, but just know that Martin Luther King Jr. called Odetta Holmes the Queen of American folk music. And she did perform at the March on Washington in 1963, in which she sang "Oh Freedom." So she was there and she was doing things, and Martin Luther King Jr. was like, yes, that lady, probably not of shadows, that lady is it. Bob Dylan said, "The first thing that turned me on to folk singing was Odetta. I heard a record of hers. Odetta sings ballads and blues in a record store, back when you could listen to records right there in the store." I remember that, but it was CDs, so you guys remember that? Right then and there, I went out and traded my electric guitar and amplifier for an acoustical guitar, a flat-top Gibson. The album was just something vital and personal. I learned all of the songs on that record. Wow. And Bob Dylan wrote the song Oxford Town, which is featured prominently in this book. So that's pretty big. How about Janis Joplin? She spent much of her adolescence listening to Odetta. And this was also the first person that Janis imitated when she began to sing. How cool is that? What about Maya Angelou? She said, "If only one could be sure that every 50 years a voice and a soul like Odetta's would come along, the centuries would pass so quickly and painlessly we would hardly recognize time." Wow. So this is a very influential person of the time that made a big stamp of her life on many great people. So inspirational, super cool. Let's talk about the name itself. Odetta is of French origin, and it means wealthy or prosperous. Okay. Odetta is often associated with elegance, sophistication, and aspirations for success. Check, check, check. The surname Holmes is of English and Scottish origin, primarily meaning dweller by the holly tree or dweller by the small island or islet. So this is interesting because when we learned about Eddie's name, we heard about that connection to nature with, I believe, Dean. His last name had that connection to, I think it was like dweller in the valley, something like that. And we said, he's like this city boy who we don't see him as a natural nature boy. And same thing here with Holmes, the dweller by the island and dweller by the holly tree. And Odetta, of course, is another city folk kind of person. We haven't seen much of her in the natural world except Roland's world. So we're keeping an eye on those things as we move forward. The island idea of Odetta is kind of interesting as well, thinking about her dual nature, and she thinks she's by herself on an island, but no man is an island. If you did your learning as a kid, no man is an island. Who said that, Michelle? You're so smart. Anyway, let's forget about that and just say that we're keeping our eye on the idea of her as an island, her as some tree-hugging kind of person. We don't see that yet. How about Detta? Detta. This comes from Italy, Italian, I guess, and is short for the name Benedetta, which means blessed or blessing. It is also associated with the concept of a divine gift and can be seen as a variant of the name Benedict. In essence, Detta carries the connotation of being a precious gift or a positive influence. Damn. I mean, we could just sit here and say, oh, Detta is a shortened form of Odetta, that's it. Yeah, but we like to dig our hooves in deeper here at Dark Tower YouTube, and when we think about the name of Detta as a blessing, like just stand alone on its own, because we're told that this is a standalone on her own kind of being. She is a blessing to Odetta in some ways because she's the one that has stepped in during these moments of intense trauma and during these hate crimes. We've recognized that Detta is the one who becomes the personality and witnesses and feels all of that horrific everything. So that's a blessing in a way. The positive influence, don't you get a kick out of that? That's amazing. So that's really funny. Her last name being Walker, we like that too because she ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan. So that's also ironically, deliciously funny. And it is linked to those walking the castle. So guardians of some kind, walkers. That would be the last name of a castle guard, I guess, based on this. So that's also the guarding nature of Detta and Odetta. I feel like there's something there, maybe we're stretching a little bit, but it's fun. More commonly, the name Walker was some sort of cloth worker. So that's, I don't know, she doesn't make her own clothes, at least not yet, so we'll have to hang on to that. And we could just say, I like the Walker with the no legs. She does travel and she does get places and make things happen despite having no legs. So Walker, movement, mover and a shaker, if you will. Okay. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, though. And as opposite of these women are, one, Odetta, is speaking in this very polite and refined way, and she doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and she's always apologizing. Nonviolent resistance. And the other one, this Detta, she's kind of balls to the wall bitch, and she is loud and obnoxious and crass, and she's not apologizing for anything. But both of them are fighting for the rights of Black people. They're both on that same team. They both have that common core value to them. They're fighting against injustice in completely opposite ways, but it's the same core value. So we pay attention to all of these things in this character. What a fascinating character. And I know that I've spent so much time on her, and we're going to spend even more. But there's just so much here that I never realized the first, second, third time I read this story. Okay, but let's kind of get into the story. Detta on the other side, and King is going to do the king thing by telling us something wild is going to happen before he tells us what that thing is. King writes, "You must be on your guard," the gunslinger said. And Eddie had agreed. But the gunslinger knew Eddie didn't know what he was talking about. The whole back half of Eddie's mind, where survival is or isn't, didn't get the message. The gunslinger saw this. It was a good thing for Eddie. He did. Ooh, what's going to happen? And if you'll remember, we had last seen Odetta was shutting down. Eddie was trying to convince her that this is real, and he was pushing it, and he's like, look at the jewels on the rings on your finger. What do you mean you don't shoplift? And that gave her some big cognitive dissonance. And then he called her Detta, and she's like, don't call me that. And it was getting tense. She's like, I've got a headache, leave me alone. And we're like, oh gosh, she has a headache. So we're very set up for this, with this dramatic irony, where we know what's about to happen, but neither of our other characters do. So that night, after everyone has fallen asleep, Detta emerges, and King says Detta Walker's eyes sprang open. So we know this is a different person. This is truly a different person, and that's been set up time and time again, that this is a distinct personality. People encounter her differently. George, the doctor, the resident in the ambulance, was like, this is two completely different people. Her face changes. This woman is a beautiful damsel in distress, and this one is a monster. So here we feel like we get that at this point. King has done a really good job of setting that up. We learn from her point of view that she's created some false memories to fill in this time, because according to her, Eddie and Roland tied her up to her chair, and they were calling her really bad names and hitting her. As she's telling us this, remembering this, she calls Roland the really bad man. You probably didn't think much of this the first time you read it. I know I didn't. But on this deeper reading, I want us to really pay attention now to how King is going to play out the idea that Detta and Detta saw each other through the door when they came through. I mean, he told us that, or we had a very big suspicion that that's what happened anyway. And we have to now, again, go back and recall how Detta and Odetta filled in time. When I'm reading this book, I'm just like, this is a lot, and I want to get back to the action. And why do we have to learn so much about Detta and Odetta? King did this on purpose to set up the distinct character traits of Detta and Odetta, so that when they do come through the door, and we have this suspicion that the door opened between them, not just to Roland's world, but between these two personalities, that they saw each other for the first time. And from that very moment, there was this meshing, switching, swapping, entanglement beginning to happen. And it happens right away. But let's go back and just refresh our memories as to how they fill in time. So Odetta's imagination novelized, this is King writing, by the way. I didn't write this. You would have figured that out probably. King writes, Odetta's imagination novelized all sorts of things which had happened when Detta was in charge of her body. Detta was not so clever. She thought she remembered some things at least, but a lot of the time she didn't. Detta was at least partially aware of the blanks. And then he concludes that introduction to Detta by saying, so sometimes she wondered, this is Detta, in a distracted sort of way, where she was when she wasn't here. But mostly her needs were too sudden and pressing for any extended contemplation, and she simply fulfilled what needed to be fulfilled, did what needed to be done. Roland would have understood. So you remember that, because we looked at how King was really pushing hard the idea that Roland and Detta Walker and Odetta are so much more similar to each other than to Eddie, than Detta is to Eddie, or Odetta. So Detta is just like, I don't know, I don't care. I'm here now and there's a task to do. But that doesn't happen here when she came through the door. She doesn't wake up and say, oh, I better take care of these honkies and kill them. No, she has this whole elaborate story, the way that Odetta had these elaborate stories of things that had happened while she wasn't herself, right? So Detta came through the door and changed to Odetta, and Odetta now had no memory of what had happened to her. So right there is a big flip-flop. Odetta is like, what the fuck? I was sitting watching the news and now I'm on this beach? That's a Detta characteristic of having no recollection of what came between then and now. And then Detta having the Odetta characteristic of filling in the blanks with all kinds of nonsense. So those right there is that flip. And it does go deeper than just a flipperoo, though, because when Odetta was making up stuff, it was just completely random stuff that didn't happen or wasn't related to anything going on. But Detta is remembering what Odetta experienced. We don't know. We know that Odetta was just kind of like having a headache and then she went to sleep. So how much of Roland and Eddie talking, shooting the lobstrosity, eating their dinner, was she actually awake for? How could either one of them have a memory of this except that Odetta was still in control in some way? We don't have enough information there. But let's just go with it, thinking that Detta is remembering what happened to Odetta, but she's just going to put this Detta Walker filter onto it. I'm going to call it the Detta lens or the Detta filter. Because, yes, she was with Roland and Eddie. That happened. But they weren't tying her up to the chair. At least not yet. They weren't taunting her, calling her bad names. That didn't happen. They did shoot a lobster. But they weren't trying to feed her poisoned meat. So it's just this warped, like Detta Walker, every white man is out to get me kind of idea that she's remembering what happened but through the lens. Does that make sense? I hope so. I'm gonna just roll with it and hope you're with me. So, and we're told Detta remembers everything. How she fought the white men, how they tied her to her chair, how they taunted her, how they hit her. All of this is happening, and listen to this. She remembers that she didn't let them work her up. They didn't rile her. She did spit in their faces, so there's a little bit of Detta-ness in it here. But she didn't react to their taunts. She remained silent. So King writes, the smell of the slowly roasting beef had been seductive, but she had made no sign. Even when the younger one had waved a chunk of it near her face, chanting, bite for it, bitch, bite for it, she had sat like stone, holding herself in. Think about that. A stolid, silent, non-violent, resistant woman. We haven't seen Detta Walker do anything like that, but we did see Odetta doing those things. So that that just doesn't sound anything like Detta. Nowhere in the upcoming chapters are we going to see her do anything like that. In fact, she won't shut up. She talks all the time. She can't keep her mouth shut, and they're even going to gag her at one point. So this is nothing like Detta, and yet this is how Detta's remembering things. So again, I just think very clearly off the bat, I can't even believe I didn't realize this until this deep reading. But I think it's very clearly King setting these characters up, telling us how they are, how they do things, how they think, how they remember, and then just tossing all of that on its head immediately after they come through the door. Okay, I did have a theory last time about how Detta Walker changes the way that she's talking. And I just want to talk a little bit more about that. And it's not really a theory, like that Detta Walker changed the way that she talked, and we pulled those examples out as talking to the woman in the Macy's versus talking to George in the ambulance versus the way that she's thinking internally. It's all kind of different. I think this is about Detta gets into that cartoonish, over-the-top voice, vocalization, words when it's a white men that are her audience. That's who she reserves turn it up to 11 personality for. That's what we've seen, and we see that here with Roland and Eddie. Detta is enraged. She's fully alive in her righteous rage, and she wants the world to see it, to witness it. The white men, that's like her enemy, the honky mafas. Like, she wants them to see it. She wants them to take note of it, pay attention, to see the shadowy side of the experience of Black people back in the 1960s. And she's doing this in a completely different way than Odetta is. It's almost this idea of like, if you asked racist white men how an angry Black woman might talk, they might give you something that sounds like Detta Walker. So she's like fulfilling their expectation in some way, perhaps. She is wanting everybody to know that she has a right to be angry. Yes, I'm angry. There's a reason that I'm angry. I have a right to be angry. Look at what is happening all around me. Look at what is happening to me. Look what I've experienced because of the hatred coming from y'all. She's showing up as the fullest version of herself, and she's like demanding an audience for it. She's absolutely a gunslinger in that way. I think she can't be ignored when she's proclaiming her truth to the world. Last time we spent a ton of time comparing Detta, Odetta to Roland, and I think if we really think about it, Detta in this situation with the waking up in the night, scoping out where's Roland, where's Eddie, they're asleep, where's the guns. That's very smart and gunslinger-like behavior, and it's exactly what we would expect Roland would do in that situation. And again, not really thinking too much about anything outside of this present here and now moment. What needs to be done? I need to get free. How am I going to do that? Get the gun and kill them. What would happen if she killed both of them? She's not even thinking about that, but we've seen Roland do that same thing. And another contrast with Detta and Odetta. Detta's loud and raucous, vulgar, violent, a monster, making no apologies. Odetta, calm, soft-spoken, refined, beautiful, submissive, nonviolent, apologizing to men. She apologized to Andrew in the limo when he was starting to get uncomfortable with her telling the experience in Oxford. Do you remember that? And then in the ambulance, Odetta asks George, "Are you okay?" Like, she's checking in on if this white dude is okay when she just had her legs chopped off. And she's, again, making him feel like he could fall in love with this woman. And then Detta wakes up and literally tries to kill him. So she's a gunslinger. Odetta, like, not so much. Odetta's like a peacekeeper in some way. Detta is the one who has these gunslinger tendencies. We see it, and Roland sees it as well, and he'll figure that out a little later in this chapter. So we've got a good handle on these people, these characters, and where they came from and what they're doing now. I also want to point out, so I'm saying as soon as they came through the door, and then I'm talking about this Detta remembering through the Odetta lens. This wasn't the first time it happened, though. Immediately when they came through the door, and Odetta now is in charge, and she's talking to Eddie, and it's just this pleasant conversation, kind of weird Stephen King meet cute on the Lobstrosity Beach situation. She is talking to Eddie, and when he asks her if she thought he was too clean cut to be a heroin addict, she says, too white. Do you remember that? And as soon as those words were out of her mouth, Odetta, she starts profusely apologizing. I'm so sorry, Eddie. That was very unkind, very unfair, and very unlike me. Does sound like Detta Walker, though, doesn't it? So I think, again, immediately we are seeing signs of this, what do you call it? Integration? Bleeding into one another. I think that's a better horror writing kind of word to use there. I'd say that based on all of this that we just went over, those personalities seeing each other through the door for sure allowed them to start taking over each other's characteristics and sharing that. Now we still haven't solved the mystery of that placental tearing sound. But by the end of the book, I will tell you what I think about that based on all of this. Next, let's talk about this immediately dislike of Roland. So we've mentioned that a little bit, I think, last time with Odetta. King pulling out this idea that Odetta doesn't like Roland, mistrusts him, is giving him the side eye, is saying, him, I don't want to be near him. And it's kind of weird. And now we have the Detta take on that, so we can take a closer look at what's going on here. So let's think about, why should Detta identify Roland as the really bad man? Because remember, she's waking up as Detta Walker and looks at Roland as like, that's the really bad man. But Detta Walker has not encountered Roland except back in the Macy's, right? So there's a connection there. So, and what happened in the Macy's? Detta Walker is like, that man is a rapist. That word is used, and it's accurate. He invaded her mind and took her body by force. And she knew that it was a white man. How did she know that? Other than the idea that anybody who would come in and forcefully take a black woman must be a white man, must be the enemy, must be a really bad man. So part of her knows that it was Roland that abducted her. So she's just connecting dots a little bit. And then, of course, she knows or thinks that Roland, because he was there in her mind when that door between Detta and Odetta was opened, that he knows that she saw Odetta and vice versa. So he knows something about them that she didn't even know about herself and is still trying to suppress, repress. So this leads to the idea of why Odetta immediately dislikes Roland. Are you following me? This gets confusing, doesn't it? But stay with me here. So the door was opened in her mind, in their mind. Hypothetically, both women knew what was happening. So it was Detta that was in control in the Macy's when Roland took over. But that door was opened, and so Odetta could see into the situation. Odetta could see the white man was raping, was taking the black woman, taking over her body by force, the invader. Odetta witnessed all of that. So she has this basis for not liking him. It's really, I think it's the explanation. I can't think of any other reason, because other than what Detta experienced with Roland in the Macy's, Odetta knows nothing about him. They come through the door and Detta switches to Odetta, and Odetta immediately is like, that guy's bad. She has no basis for that except she saw and witnessed what happened with Roland taking over, right? And I never noticed this before reading this time. Roland does not speak to Odetta, not once, in that earlier part of the chapter. When Odetta and Eddie are talking, not even once. He acts like she's invisible. Eddie is the one who's answering the questions, trying to reassure her, help her feel safe. He's the one that's doing all of the work here, and he's trying his best. But at the end of the day, neither of these women know, why are they here? Where are they going? What the fuck is even happening right now? Nobody's talking about the bigger picture in terms of, we're on a quest, there's a dark tower somewhere. Eddie heard about that. He got to hear about that from Roland before he even came through the door. And then afterwards heard other things about the dark tower and why we're going there. And then Eddie's like, okay, I want to go there too. Detta was given none of that, no choice, abducted, and then none of that was even shared after she came through. That sucks. That really sucks. So, Roland is a kidnapper, and between both women, they see him that way. He's a kidnapper. He's a rapist. He also is completely coldly ignoring them. He ignores their confusion, their sadness, the questions. She doesn't even exist to him. So I think all of that, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense as to why both of these women really, really, really dislike Roland and see him as the really bad man. Such great critical analysis today. I love it, love it, love it. Let's get back into the story where Detta Walker wakes up, looks around. She sees Eddie and Roland, sees the guns. We learn later that Roland did this on purpose. So this was King at the beginning being like, good thing Roland knew that Eddie was not paying attention. So Roland left those guns out. We watch her crawling over. She's super smart. She doesn't click the hammer until the wind blows and points it at Eddie's temple. And King writes, so this is from Roland's point of view, observing Detta in this moment. She swung the cylinder back in, began to cock the hammer, and then paused again. Paused for the wind to mask the single low click. He thought, here is another one. God, she's evil, this one. And she's legless. But she's a gunslinger as surely as Eddie is one. So we've identified another gunslinger here. Also, he calls Eddie a gunslinger surely, which I like, because we knew that he thought Eddie was a gunslinger in the making and he was going to help shape him and all this, but surely Eddie is a gunslinger, and here's another one. And it's also why he's giving Eddie this teachable moment in the first place, because he's like, this is a gunslinger and he needs to learn. When I say be on your guard, I mean it. I'm not just joking around. Speaking of gunslingers, Detta pulls the trigger. She was going to kill him. She was just going to kill both of them. And again, I don't know what would have happened. It would have been a totally different story, that's for sure. But just, again, kind of solidifying, she's a gunslinger and she does what needs doing, and Roland would have done exactly the same thing, I think. I like this description of Roland. It has nothing to do with anything, but I want to read it because I love it. King writes, "The gunslinger watched all of this from one half-open eye. The fever was back, but not bad yet. Not so bad that he must mistrust himself. So he waited, that one half-open eye, the finger on the trigger of his body. The body which had always been his revolver, when there was no revolver at hand." Wow. I love it so much. And Roland is many, many things, but a total badass is absolutely one of those things. King moves us over from Detta's point of view to Roland's. And now we're going to go back in time to the events of the previous evening, where, of course, nothing that Detta is telling us actually happened. Like we've already covered, she made all of it up using Odetta's memories through the Detta, filtering them through the Detta lens. And then we see Eddie and Roland are talking about what is up with this lady. And this is where Roland told Eddie for the first time to really be on his guard, because Roland is highly suspicious that it's going to be Detta that wakes up, because he's like, this is weird. This woman in the Macy's was a snake pit, awful person, and this Odetta is nothing like that. So something really odd is up. And we're going to also see that Eddie is talking about the schizophrenia, which we know is dissociative identity disorder, but we'll kind of get to that. But that helps Roland also say, okay, this is a dangerous person. It's probably two people in one body, so we really need to be watching out for this, for the bad one. This is also, we're seeing how Roland is seeing Eddie as a gunslinger in training, and he sees himself as Eddie's teacher now. So I kind of really love that. And we do go back to this gunslinger mantra that we heard all the way back in the Gunslinger when Roland was talking about court. And it's only the second time coming up. It's part of world building. It's just cool. And I think because we've heard it there and we're hearing it here, we're going to hear it again. Let's make a prediction that we're going to hear this again. And if and when we do, we'll do a deeper dive into it. But I just want to point out that here it is again, and it's a cool thing. So King writes, "Then they had talked, and Eddie had said something which burst upon Roland like a sudden flare of lightning. It was too bright and too brief to be total understanding, but he saw much, the way one may discern the lay of the land in a single lucky stroke of lightning. He could have told Eddie then, but did not. He understood that he must be Eddie's Court. And when one of Court's pupils was left hurt and bleeding by some unexpected blow, Court's response had always been the same. The child doesn't understand a hammer until he's mashed his finger at a nail. Get up and stop whining, maggot. You have forgotten the face of your father." And we'll also remember that happened again in the Gunslinger when Cuthbert had messed up with David the Hawk, and he was slow releasing the rope or whatever the thing is. And Court made Cuthbert perform an act of contrition. And this act of contrition was, I have forgotten the face of my father. It's just so fucking perfect for this story, for world building, to put us into what is a gunslinger. I think I have forgotten the face of my father. You have forgotten the face of your father. I love it. So again, keeping an eye out for that in upcoming stories. So let's go back to Detta's trying to kill Eddie. Shooting him doesn't work, of course, so she bashes him with the gun and probably could have even killed him that way, except Roland finally decides he's going to intervene, that Eddie has learned his lesson, we hope. Spoiler alert, Roland, he has not. And he prevents any more serious damage from being done. Now, Eddie and Roland, with great effort, bind Detta to the wheelchair. So we have to pause and consider how this is exactly what Detta had imagined happening to her. Within 5 minutes of her waking up, it had occurred. And we said that Detta was remembering Odetta's memories of the beach through the Detta lens. But this one, this false memory of Detta saying they tied me up to the wheelchair, I'm going to take it back a little bit and just say this isn't 100% the Detta lens. We're diving so deep here, guys. Don't you just love it? Because remember way back when we met Odetta, she was thinking about how her and her friends had been treated in Oxford Town. King writes, this is Odetta thinking about awful things. They take the chance to degrade you while they still can, to teach you you can be degraded. The lesson is that you're just an animal in a cage. No more than that. No better than that. Just an animal in a cage. That's Odetta. That's not Detta. That's Odetta. So I think Detta accessed this core belief of Odetta's, this memory of Odetta being put in a cage, being imprisoned by white men, and Odetta's feelings about that. Detta and Odetta, again, have this core value that they share. So it's not always, oh, it's just the Detta lens. It's like, part of that is Odetta too. There is just some inherent enmeshing here that we're going to be aware of. I also want to just think about, we've talked about this before, this idea of Roland having these dark thoughts and then seeing them physically manifested. So remember the slow mutants, Roland was like, I'm going to hurt the boy. I don't want to be a monster. And then here are these monsters trying to hurt Jake. And Roland on the beach being like, I'm such a piece of shit. I deserve to die. It would be better if I were dead. This kind of self-punishment wish. And then here come the Lobstrosities doing just that. So we've talked about that a few times now. And I think this is another instance of that. It's just it happens so quickly that we see Detta's made up idea of being tied to the wheelchair, and then it happens almost immediately afterwards. There's something here where she had this vision of that, this kind of core belief, this inner self-talk about how bad white men are, and they imprison you and they treat you like an animal and they tie you to the chair, and that's exactly what manifests for Detta. After this encounter, Roland talks to Eddie about it, and King writes, "She's the woman I was in. Do you believe me now?" "I believed you before," Eddie said. "I told you that." You believed. You believed on the top of your mind. Do you believe it all the way down now? All the way to the bottom? Eddie looked at the shrieking, convulsing thing in the chair and then looked away, white, except for the slash on his jaw, which was still dripping a little. That side of his face was beginning to look a little like a balloon. "Yes," he said. "God, yes. This woman is a monster." Eddie began to cry. The gunslinger wanted to comfort him, could not commit such a sacrilege. He remembered Jake too well, and walked off into the dark with his new fever, burning and aching inside him. So we're back to the old Roland, the one that we all know and hate, as he refers to the comforting of a friend who is his companion and who saved his life several times, his grieving friend, as a sacrilege. Damn it, that is extreme language Roland. But it does let us know where Roland is in all of this as we continue to track his character's arc. So this is familiar old territory to us. We saw this before. And we're going to check in with Roland, which is like, okay, he wants to comfort Eddie. This is good. We like that he has that urge at all. That's good. That's nice. But then B, he considers this act a sacrilege. That's bad. And then worst of all, C, his reasoning behind calling this act a sacrilege seems to be that, like Jake, Eddie is just another chip on the poker table, because Roland brought Jake into this. So Eddie's just another piece on the game board of the tower game that Roland is playing. So bad. Mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, bad, 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 Roland. And notice how King pairs this moment of like, you're blowing it, Roland, with Roland's physical illness. Is this a coincidence? We're going to assume that every move that the author makes is intentional. And there is definitely some metaphysical shenanigans that are going on here that I want to talk about a little bit. Because many spiritual traditions believe that all physical illness stems from a spiritual cause, from an extra physical cause, if you will. Diseased, diseased psychological states show up as physical illness. And it's not just a spiritual woo-woo thing, because even Western medical doctors not believe in, but have witnessed psychosomatic illnesses. It's the same thing. Extra physical is spiritual. Psychological, that's also extra physical, manifesting in physical form. Psychosomatic, spiritual illness, soul sickness. We've been told about Roland's soul sickness, with King using those exact words in other places in this book. So, the timing of Roland's relapse is interesting here, because we remember that he was very, very sick before he met Eddie. And then Eddie saved his life, and Eddie was on board. And then there was this kind of growing camaraderie, almost like brothers relationship forming between them, and Roland's health improved. That all ended at door number 2. And this is where Eddie had that Mexican standoff with Roland, right? So we saw that happen, and then Roland had that subsequent inner psychological love crisis where he was like, it's so hard to love, and I want to be loved. That was right after that fight with Eddie, where things kind of broke down a little bit. And it was right after that psychological crisis that Roland's health started to take another turn. That's when the fever came back. So Roland is soul sick. And here, we have Roland doing a similar thing where he's just like, I can't be nice to these people. That's sacrilegious. Like, I can't do that. I have to treat them like objects that are just there for me to manipulate so that I can get what I want. Well, no wonder you're soul sick, dummy. Like, get with it, man. Get with it, Roland. But that's soul sickness. And then we have the physical manifestation of his symptoms getting worse, this new fever burning within him. So maybe stop thinking that you have to sacrifice the people that you love. I don't know. I think that was on purpose, though, with King. Let me know what you think. Before we move on from this, and we're going to wrap this episode, part 1 of this episode, up in a second, but let's have some empathy for Roland. We're being mean to him. We hate him again. It's kind of fun to hate him and to be mad at him. But we haven't given him a lot of empathy in a while, and he needs it just as much as anybody else. So we're mad that he's back to being an asshole, but we're going to remember that this isn't his fault. Not totally. Because when he was very small, we've gone over this, but here it is again, his mother's comfort, contact, closeness, that was systematically stripped away from Roland's life. So the idea of giving comfort to somebody in need, he didn't get that at a very young age from the person that he wanted it from the most. He wanted it from his mother, and he never got it again after they started taking it away, as far as we know. He killed his mother, we know that. He dropped that back in the gunslinger. We haven't heard what happened, but we know that it sounds pretty bad. Things didn't go well with the two of these characters. We'll probably learn about that, I hope. Excuse me. So, poor little Roland growing up without companionship, without love. The love that he's had, the friends that he's had, we've learned, are all gone. They're all dead. Seemingly on the road to the tower, some of them. Seemingly he might have had something to do with the death of Susan, maybe, or we just don't know, but it all feels kind of icky and weird and bad. It doesn't feel like, oh, Roland absolutely was doing the right thing, and it was just that they should all die, well, getting ahead of myself here. But just to say that he's playing out what happened to him as a kid. He's projecting his experience onto other people, onto the world around him. It's very sad. We hate it, but we're also going to feel sad about it and have empathy for him. And we're going to think about the times that we are kind of enacting things from our childhood. We're still carrying these wounds from the way that our parents treated us. If we felt like we weren't able to be comforted, if we were getting yelled at, if we felt like love was being withheld, we didn't get the closeness or relationship that we craved and yearned for, that every little child wants and needs and deserves. Many of us didn't get that as well. And how many of us carry those wounds around today? We talk so much about trauma, and that's what Roland is doing. He's carrying these childhood wounds around, this trauma around with him, and just unconsciously enacting it upon his own, in his own life and on the people around him. It's all very sad. So I think we're going to still love Roland, at least for now. That's going to be the end of part 1. Stick around, because part 2 is coming up, where we cover the rest of the chapter of Detta on the Other Side and Reshuffle. So hang around. Guess what? That episode's already posted, so you don't even have to wait. I shall see you on the other side. But still, until we meet again, until you watch that episode, I do hope that you have long days and pleasant nights, my friends.